home state of Virginia. This is the true crime case of the Colonial Parkway murders. The Colonial Parkway murders were the serial murders of at least 8 people in the U.S. state of Virginia between 1986 and 1989. The killings were associated with the Colonial Parkway, a 22-mile-long thoroughfare that cuts through the Colonial National Historical Park and connects Jamestown, Williamsburg, and Yorktown. Long stretches of the road are devoid of any street lights and are extremely isolated, making it a popular Lover's Lane location frequented by young adults. In each incident, a young couple sitting in a vehicle was targeted, and both were killed. 3 pairs of victims were recovered, and another couple remains missing and presumed dead. Several additional homicides have also been tentatively linked to the 4 confirmed cases. The causes of death included strangulation, gunshot, and stabbing. There was no evidence of burglary or sexual assault in any of the cases. The killer drove his victims' vehicles away from the murder sites. The linking of the 4 crimes is circumstantial. In January of 2024, authorities announced that at least 2 of the murders, David Knobling and Robin Edwards, had been conclusively linked to an official suspect, Alan Wilmer Sr., a local fisherman who died in 2017. Wilmer was also linked through DNA evidence to the previously unrelated murder of Teresa Lynn Spa. Wilmer had been described as suspect number 1 in the presumed murders of Cassandra Haley and Keith Cole, but was freed after an FBI polygraph. The first 2 known victims were Kathleen Marion Thomas, 27 years of age, a United States Naval Academy graduate, and College of William and Mary, senior Rebecca Ann Dowski, age 21, a business management major, working as a stockbroker at the time of the murder. Between well as signs of strangulation. Their throats had been slashed so deeply that they were nearly decapitated, and the killer had covered the bodies and vehicle with diesel fuel, but had not lit them on fire. Over 100 latent and full prints were found on the interior and exterior of the car, but they matched no one in police records. Dowski's body was found in the back seat of the car, while Thomas was found stuffed into the hatchback. Thomas apparently struggled with her attacker, as a clump of her hair was later found between her fingers. Both women were fully clothed, and there was no evidence of sexual assault. Authorities ruled out robbery as a motive, since both women's purses were located within the vehicle, and no money or jewelry had been taken. At the time, the police believed that the murders happened elsewhere, and there was not much blood in the car itself. In November 1986, just weeks after the murder, press reported that FBI profilers at Quantico, who had studied serial killers, were constructing a profile of the person or persons responsible for the murder. In 2024, Bill Thomas recalled that 4 days after his sister Kathy's death, the FBI suggested to him that the perpetrator may have been a member of law enforcement. In 1988, salesman David Lee Knobling, age 20, and 8th grade student Robin Margaret Edwards, age 14, were murdered. Edwards and Knobling first met on September 19th, when David agreed to drive his younger cousin on a date with Robin Edwards to see the comedy Dragnet. David left his home around midnight, while Robin left hers half an hour later. A group of teenagers partying on Ragged Island until 2 a.m. reported no sign of Knobling's truck. Knobling's vehicle, a black Ford Ranger, had previously been discovered on September 21st by a patrolman at the Ragged Island Wildlife Refuge parking area, with the wipers, engine, and radio still running, and some articles of clothing inside. Both doors were left open, and the driver's side window was partially rolled down, which caused police to speculate that the perpetrator either was or had been posing as a uniformed officer. Knobling's wallet was found inside the pickup, which ruled robbery out as a motive. On September 23rd, the bodies of Knobling and Edwards were found after being washed ashore with the tide, about 100 feet apart on the bank of the James River. Both victims had been shot, Edwards in the back of the head, execution style, and Knobling twice, once in the head and once in the shoulder. Both were partially clothed. Edwards was found with her jeans unfastened and her bra around her neck. Investigators were unsure if a sexual assault had taken place, since despite Edwards being underage, it was presumed marshy area of the James River in Suffolk, Virginia, near the mouth of the Chuckatuck Creek that flows into the James River. His wrists and ankles were tied, and a rope was around his neck. The lead investigator in the case believed that Pettinger had likely been hogtied. The autopsy showed that Pettinger had blunt force blows to the back of the head. He was found to have been thrown alive into the river and drowned, unable to swim. Pettinger's murder remains unsolved. It occurred during the period and near the area where the murders took place. Pettinger worked as a security guard and loss prevention officer for the same security services company as the mother of Robin Edwards at the time of Robin's murder. Bonnie Edwards worked as a receptionist there. Suspect Wayne Elliott Mack, a fellow dance instructor, later acknowledged having left the Lauer's car, a gold 1972 Chevy Nova, was later found abandoned at the Interstate 64 rest stop in New Kent County. It is unclear whether Phelps and Lauer were killed at the rest stop or elsewhere. Both the driver and passenger side doors were unlocked, and the keys still in the ignition. Police found dirt and grass stains on the vehicle's underside, suggesting the car had recently been driven through the woods. Phelps' purse was found inside the car, so again, robbery was ruled out as a motive. On October 19th, the skeletonized bodies of Phelps and Lauer were found in a wooded area by hunters along Interstate 64 between Williamsburg and Richmond. They were covered in an electric blanket from Lauer's car and were badly decomposed. This made it impossible to determine either the cause of death or whether there had been a sexual assault. The hunters discovered the bodies on a logging road about a quarter of a mile from Courthouse Road, a location about a mile from the rest stop where Lauer's car was found. In 2010, a note was discovered in a box taken years earlier from Phelps's apartment. The note, which was undated and purportedly written by Phelps, indicated that she was to meet someone in a blue van at a rest stop. The note named an individual and provided a phone number. Possible sexually harassing customers and employees, including Mary. So the whole family was fucked up, I guess. Lori Powell. Lori Ann Powell Compton, age 18, a Gloucester High School graduate, went missing on March 8, 1988, after having an argument with her boyfriend, which ended with Lori getting out of his car. She was last seen by him at 11:30 p.m., walking on the route 614 towards Route 17 in the White Marsh area in Gloucester County, Virginia. On April 2nd, 1988, Lori's body was spotted floating in the James River off Craney Island near Ragged Island. Her body was found nude and with multiple stab wounds to her back. Compton worked for the same security company where Pettinger and Edward's mother worked at the time of her murder. Powell's boyfriend, Chris Cutler, was a suspect in the murder. Shenandoah National Park killings. The bodies of Julian Marie Williams, age 24, and Laura Salisbury Winans, age 26, were found by park rangers at the Shenandoah National Park on June 1st of 1996, after Lolly's golden retriever Taj was located wandering near the White Oak Canyon Trail. The two young women were in a relationship, and on May 19th of 1996 went on a camping trip in Shenandoah National Park in Virginia. Julianne and Laura were last seen alive on May 24th in the park. On May 31st, their families reported them missing. Their bodies were found at a remote campsite in the park, about a quarter mile from Skyline Drive off the Appalachian Trail. Laura was found inside the tent. Julianne was found in her sleeping bag about 40 feet away, down an embankment. Their hands were bound, their mouths were gagged, and their throats were slit. Both were partially undressed, but neither was sexually assaulted. The FBI investigated whether Julian and Laura's murders were related to the 1986 murders of Kathleen Thomas and Rebecca Andowski. In that case, the victims were similarly bound and stabbed. They had also not been sexually molested. Both double murders occurred on National Park property, the historic Colonial Parkway and the Shenandoah, which were connected by Interstate 64. Detective Steve Spingola, who was asked to investigate the Colonial Parkway murders as a private investigator, believed that the murders of Kathy and Rebecca were not related to the other Colonial Parkway murders at all, and were instead connected to Williams and Weinman's murders. In 2001, the Department of Justice indicted Daryl David Rice for the murders, but charges were dropped after DNA found at the scene matched neither Rice nor the victims. In 2024, 15 days after his exoneration, Rice was killed in a car accident. In June of 2024, the FBI announced new DNA evidence linking the killing to serial rapist Walter Leo Jackson. Thomas's wallet had been removed from her purse, as if she was preparing to show her identification. Just days after the first murder, the FBI privately suggested to family that the perpetrator might be a member of law enforcement or other authority figure. Another theory that it was fishermen, which we find out that the killer ultimately was a fisherman. In the first murders of Dowski and Thomas, a piece of nautical line had been found in Thomas's hair. The killer attempted to use diesel fuel to set fire to the victim's vehicle, suggesting the perpetrators purchased fuel at a gas station for use in a boat rather than purchasing it directly from a marina, a practice common to local fishermen. The sharpness of the knife, which nearly decapitated Thomas, also suggested a fisherman. Knobling and Edwards were found on the banks of the James River. In the Haley call case, police dogs traced a scent from the car to the nearby edge of the York River, suggesting the involvement of a boat. Vehicle staging. Kathy Thomas's vehicle was found with the driver's seat adjusted for someone taller than her, suggesting the killer may had driven it before it was pushed off the embankment. A search of the area failed to find any pools of blood. The murders had happened elsewhere, potentially somewhere not even on the Parkway. David Knobling's truck was found with doors open, keys in the ignition, and the radio playing. Knobling, an automotive enthusiast, never left his truck unlocked. Knobling consistently parked by backing in, yet the truck was found parked by driving forward. Knobling had wired his car's radio directly to the battery so that the ignition did not need to be set to accessories, as it was when the truck was discovered. This suggested someone other than Knobling had been the last to operate the vehicle. When Keith Call's vehicle was found on the Parkway, families quickly disputed that the victims would have intentionally parked there. Both families reported their loved ones had a fear of the dark, isolated Parkway at nighttime. Call's keys were in the ignition, and his gold wristwatch was left in the seat, something family insisted he would never do. Daniel Lauer's vehicle was found near a westbound interstate rest area, but Lauer and Phelps were known to be traveling eastward to Virginia Beach. A feathered roach clip, which Lauer kept attached to the rearview mirror, had been transferred to the driver's side mirror. Another theory, multiple offenders working together. Larry McCann, head of the Virginia State Police's Behavioral Science Unit, argued that two individuals were working together in the murders. He felt the level of control demonstrated over victims suggested two perpetrators. Irvin Wells of the FBI also suspected a pair of offenders instead of a single offender. Liberty Security Services. On April 19, 1988, press reported that local private detective Ronald Little, then under arrest for immigration charges, alleged he was a suspect in the Parkway murders. Robin Edwards' mother, Bonnie, had been employed by his company, while Brian Pettinger had worked as a security guard and loss prevention officer for the firm. Lori Ann Powell Compton, who had gone missing on March 8, 1988, was also an employee of the company. The FBI denied that Little was a suspect in the murders. And finally, suspect identified. Alan Wade Wilmer, nicknamed Pokey, worked as a fisherman on his own boat, the Denny Wade, primarily harvesting clams and oysters. He later started a tree cutting company. He was an avid hunter, a member of a local hunting club, and won archery competitions. He was married on February 22nd, 1975. He later divorced. Wilmer had 2 children, both adults, at the time of his death. Wilmer was known to confront couples on the Colonial Parkway. In one instance, Wilmer had confronted a girl and a long-haired boyfriend, mistaking the pair for a same-sex couple. Upon seeing the couple was heterosexual, he laughed. Wilmer placed himself near the site of the Keith Call, Cassandra Haley recovered vehicle. Despite public protest, Wilmer's DNA was not entered into the CODIS, the U.S.'s national DNA database. So, folks, sometimes he sexually assaulted, sometimes he didn't. Robbery never truly seemed to be a motive. It did seem like he had an agenda against same-sex couples. And perhaps his brother, who also had an affinity for violence, was involved, as it was likely that it was a 2-person operation to carry out these killings. Very interesting case for me personally. I am, well versed in that area. It's close to where I grew up. I spent a lot of time going to Williamsburg and Jamestown and Yorktown, and also had been, on Skyline Drive in the Shenandoah Park. Wild. Virginia's got a lot of stuff and a lot of history, but this case I actually knew nothing about. It kind of was going on when I was a little kid, but as an adult, being familiar with all of the places they described is kind of surreal and strange, knowing that you were that close to where multiple murders occurred. Anyway, thank you guys so much for tuning in tonight. I will not ramble on about my home state. I appreciate you guys. Thank you again for tuning in. The highest compliment you can pay to the channel is a thumbs up, subscribe, comment, share. Let's get us on the YouTube algorithm, folks. And I will see all of you on the next